Avatar, and welcome to the final episode of our Digimon Tamers Review series. This is one of the biggest projects that I've ever set out to accomplish on this channel, and I am beyond glad that I've seen it to its end. For those of you who have followed episode by episode, I thank you so much for coming along with me on this ride. And in this final episode, we'll be taking a look at the US Mode-Changing Gallantmon to Gallantmon Crimson Mode Figure. And this episode was only made possible by Thisisjoser. It's thanks to him that I was able to complete this figure for review. Now, this is unlike any Digivolving figure we've seen in the line thus far. In fact, if you ask me, this figure is pretty much a precursor to the Spirit Evolution figures from Frontier, in that its transformation involves attaching armor pieces to a base figure. And yes, along with Gallantmon, you not only get his lance, but 16 armor pieces. Unlike these Spirit Evolution figures, however, the armor pieces can't form anything on their own. This is rather unfortunate, as in the show, Gallantmon Crimson Mode was formed from the combination of both Gallantmon and Grani. This set would have been beyond perfect if all of these armor pieces could have combined in some way to form Grani. Of course, as Grani wasn't originally designed with the intention to be turned into a transforming toy, unlike the Frontier spirits, that was just never going to be possible. So they'll have to be left off to the side in Gallantmon mode, which of course makes them extremely easy to lose. Starting with the base Gallantmon figure, it's pretty decent in its own right. In fact, I'd first like to draw your attention to how much better the sculpt is than the warped Digivolving Gallantmon figure I reviewed a couple of episodes back. Now that's how you do a Gallantmon head sculpt. Sadly, there's just not enough paint on this figure. While all the detail is sculpted in, all of it's washed out due to being cast in this milky white plastic. To be fair, all of it's covered up in Crimson mode, and they might have intentionally left off most of the paint details to prevent scratching or paint transfer, but it seems like a wasted opportunity. With a little bit of paint, someone who's skilled in this area could definitely elevate this figure to a whole new level. Of course, all of the paint in the world wouldn't help with the kibble, which take the form of its inaccurate cape and lance. Yeah, they are not kidding anyone with this cape, even though they did try their best by casting the wings in translucent pink plastic. However, because they used the same batch of plastic for the wings as the lance is now an inaccurate shade of pink. Speaking of the lance, it's clearly Crimson Mode's Gangnir folded in two. We have the little wing details to the sides, and the handle is just Gangnir's handle. Unfortunately, he doesn't come with his shield, and no, the warped Digivolving figure's shield is not compatible. But honestly, there would just have been another accessory to keep track of. Lastly, the articulation is surprisingly good. Well, to be fair, for a figure that has no need to take into account an alternate mode, it's really par for the course. The head can move from side to side, but it's obstructed by the cheek spikes. The arms are technically on ball joints. I say technically because even though they can move all the way around, they can only move in and out by this much. He does have a really tight elbow joint that can get you 90 degrees, though I wouldn't do that if I were you, and I'll explain more in just a bit. And yes, he does have a forearm swivel. He has a completely unhindered waist joint. As for the legs, they can go all the way up and all the way out to the side. The knees can bend about 90 degrees, and there is a rotation joint at the knee. And while the feet are on ball joints, they're limited by the leg armor. And with that, it's time to finish up this review series just like how Tamers did it, in style, with the debut of Gallantmon Crimson Mode. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the figure shines. Literally. A stark contrast from his plain white Gallantmon mode, Gallantmon Crimson Mode is anything but plain. Decked out in shiny red armor, he's absolutely resplendent. Not only is he extremely accurate, save for the still visible white bits, everything is painted and detailed. With his 10 wings fully spread out, he simply commands your attention from any shelf you place him on. Normally, as I mentioned previously in the Warp Digivolving Gallantmon figure review, I absolutely loathe chrome. It's tacky, attracts fingerprints, scratches like crazy, and flakes off eventually. However, it just works with this figure as he's supposed to be a literal knight in shining armor. Not only that, the chrome is painted matte, and that does help in reducing its ability to accumulate fingerprints and scratches, on the red parts at least. And lastly, to my knowledge, there haven't been any reports of the chrome flaking on this figure even after all these years, so I'm not too worried. However, no figure is perfect, and this figure is no exception. Firstly, since we're on the subject of the chrome, notice how it's applied half-heartedly, only on the chest, crotch, and 2 shoulder pieces? Well, honestly, I really wish they would have gone either way, either all chrome or no chrome. Similarly, this half-hearted approach can be seen with these pink wings. As mentioned previously, the wings are only cast in pink in an attempt to simulate Gallantmon's cape. They shouldn't have even bothered. Not only does this really not make a difference in Gallantmon mode, it severely compromises Crimson mode as the wings are now an inaccurate pink instead of white. The same goes for Gungnir. The sad thing is, we actually have a picture of what a fully chromed figure with white wings and a white lance would have looked like. Here it is. Yep, this is what the prototype looked like. We were this close to getting a perfect Gallantmon Crimson Mode figure, but it looks like budget constraints and unnecessary compromises got in the way at the very last minute. But in the end, I'm really glad that the figure made it to production at all, and there's really not much to complain about accuracy-wise. In terms of articulation, however, as one would expect, thanks to all the armor, the articulation is indeed somewhat hindered, but not by much. In fact, only the elbow articulation seems to have been limited, though that might not be a bad thing. For you see, if this figure had one true flaw, it would be this. The elbow joints are wont to explode. Exploding joints rears its ugly head again. So if you own or plan on owning this figure, I'd caution against bending the elbows too much. Despite the color, the wings are simply excellently executed though. Like Cyberdramon's wings, they can not only hinge, but rotate at the back and at the wing root itself. Last but not least, let's come back to the accessory. In this mode, Gungnir looks great save for being cast in pink. Sadly, as it's made out of a softer plastic, the tips of the lance tend to warp very easily. The final nitpick that I have is that he doesn't come with his sword. Again, perhaps it's because they couldn't find a way to work it into the transformation, but seeing that he's only known to have 2 weapons, this figure kinda feels incomplete without it. In conclusion, even though this Mode-Changing Gallantmon figure is unlike any other toy in the Tamers line of US Digivolving figures, it pretty much fits right in. It has one really good mode, one not so good mode, and has areas that are prone to breakage. Regardless, if you ask me, its sheer beauty and shelf presence trumps any issue it has. And if you're a Tamers fan or even a fan of Digimon in general, there's really no better figure to get than this one. It's the ultimate form of the leader's Digimon that's representative of the series as a whole. While this figure is rather rare, especially one that's complete, it was released in both Season 3 and 4 packaging, making it more readily available than some of the rarer figures in the line. So, this is Acta saying thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you've liked my series of Digimon Tamers reviews, I hope that you'll stick around for my other videos where I delve into my other passions that range from anime to figures and beyond.